Storytelling is alive and well in Alaska. Meet John Active, a man with a passion for preserving memories, culture, and language. And David Katzeek is a man on a mission to pass Tlingit on to the next generation.
Sponsorship for Frontiers with Rhonda McBride is provided by Kupik Corporation and Spinard Builders Supply. Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief the best is yet to come, bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to Frontiers. One of the biggest frontiers for many Alaska Natives is the fight to keep their language and culture alive. Many words have been lost, but many words have also returned, often thanks to elders who managed to pass on their teachings to someone who has carried the torch. Well, our guest this week on Frontiers has been on the front lines of saving Yupik, a language you can hear in Southwest Alaska, not just on the streets, but also on the radio.
I'm John Active.
John Active has been heard on Bethel's public radio airwaves for many years, broadcasting in both English and Yupik. He's often the bridge between two worlds on radio talk shows, helping public officials and Yupik listeners carry on a conversation.
We have a call from James at Nabuskak. Good morning, James.
John has also worked as a newscaster, translating English into Yupik so that elders can understand what's going on in the world. And joining us now, John Active, a lot of people know you for your work as a newscaster and a commentator, but I think our audience is going to be delighted to see your storyteller side, which a legacy which you inherited from your grandmother, Maggie Lynn. So maybe first of all, start off by telling us about how you came to be adopted by Maggie Lynn.
Okay, what happened was that my mother, Elsie Active, was the daughter of Maggie Lind and her second husband, Adolf Lind. Now, they had one son, and that was my stepmother's parent, Maggie anyway, but not Adolf. But Adolf and Maggie had one son. And in the summertime, he was working on a steamboat, and he must have had a heart attack and fell in the river and drowned. So when that happened, Maggie and Adolf kind of shut themselves away from the community and quit associating with hardly anyone. And so when my mom saw that, Elsie, she gave me up. She gave me into the care of Maggie and Adolf Lynn to raise, to be occupied and not be so heartbroken all the time.
And that's kind of a common Yupik practice, is if somebody loses a child, they may allow some relative to adopt that child.
And so that's what happened. And I grew up and I got my awareness over at my grandma's house. And, that's where I grew up, went to school. And
so what was the first story that you heard from Maggie Lind?
It was a very short story, and it's about a snipe, a sandpiper, and he's going to lay some eggs, or she's going to lay some eggs, and she's flying around overhead on above the tundra, and she's crying, and she's saying, "Oh my, I don't have a place to lay my eggs. I don't have a nest." Well, pretty soon she saw this man walking on the tundra, and the man had a top hat on. And so he took his top hat off and put it down on the tundra and said, "Here, you can lay your eggs in my hat." And that was Abraham Lincoln, according to my grandmother.
I don't remember that Abraham Lincoln turned up in Yupik history.
No, but she made it very interesting. And then when I found out who Abraham Lincoln was, I said, "Whoa, what was he doing in Alaska?"
Well, now, did Maggie Lynn just sort of sit you down and say, "John, memorize this story, I'm going to tell it to you"? And Is that how she did it?
No, no. The way I learned her stories was she would put me to sleep by telling me the stories. And she'd tell them over and over again sometimes, and I would fall asleep, and then the next evening she's going to put me to sleep, and then I'd say, gee, I fell asleep before you ended the story yesterday. Could you tell it over again? And this time I'll stay awake and, usually fell asleep, but that way I learned to learn the stories.
Now, we have a story from the archives of the University of Alaska Fairbanks of Maggie telling a story about how the fox turned red. And so we're going to play some of this, but can you set us up for what we're about to hear?
Yeah, well, the fox, it was in the fall when or some middle of summer when the geese molt. A lot of migratory birds molt in July. And so one day the fox was walking along and he's looking for something to eat, and he came upon a molted goose that couldn't fly away. Well, the fox was all white in those days. He was all white. And the fox was so sure that the goose wouldn't fly away or anything, he'd close his eyes and he started singing about all the different goose parts he's going to be eating.
Well, let's hear Maggie tell the story from here.
Okay.
Chatona leunga hangayeya, katpakona leunga hangayeya, jamiksaune hangayeya. And he opened his eyes, and still the goose was walking along. Oh, I'll take my time. He can't fly anyway. I'll just close my eyes and sing some more. And he says, Chatona leunga hangayeya, kamikwaktona leunga hangayeya, jamiksaune hangayeya. And he opened his eyes, and where's the goose? The goose is gone.
So I guess the fox got outfoxed, basically.
Yeah, the fox got outfoxed, and he was so embarrassed about losing his meal that he turned completely red with embarrassment. Then, of course, later on he had a color. He found some place where a man had built a fire, and he colored the tips of his ears black, and his feet and paws, and took some white ash and colored the tip of his tail white, and in his chest with white ash. That's how the fox got his colors.
Well, one of the stories that everybody loves to hear is Maggie Lynn's story about how the crane got its blue eyes. And I've heard you tell this story, and it usually takes about a half an hour. And I've seen little kids mesmerized by it. But could you kind of give us a shortened version of that story? Because it's berry picking season. It seems so appropriate.
Oh, yeah. It is berry picking season back in western Alaska, and there's millions and millions of berries right now. Salmon berries, blueberries, cranberries are going to be showing up pretty soon, and blackberries too, just millions. And so the crane is out flying around, and he's looking for something to eat, a crane, and he spots a great big patch of berries down on the tundra. So he swooped down, and because it was hunting season at the same time, he was afraid that a hunter might sneak up on him and get him. So he took his eyes out and put them on a stump and said, "Eyes, I'm going to go over here and pick some berries, and while you be on the lookout, and if you see somebody coming, you call, then I'll come and get you and we can get away." Well, while he was berry picking, the crane he heard his eyes start calling. And so he ran back, put his eyes on, and first time it was a ptarmigan, next time it was a piece of stick drifting on the river, and he scolded his eyes, put them back down. He said, "Now you make sure next time it's a hunter, call me. Those berries are really tasty." So I went back to the tundra. Sure enough, again, the eyes started calling. The crane says, they're probably seeing things again. And so he kept eating berries, but the eyes' cries were getting further and further away. And so he went back to the stump, and he felt around, the eyeballs was gone. Oh man, he was so embarrassed and ashamed, and he went back on the tundra, and he was just sad. Then he had an idea. He felt around on the tundra and he found these two berries and he put them on where his eyeballs had been. And he looked and everything was just ugly red. Everything was red, the sky, the water, the tundra. Oh, these will never do. He took them out, threw them away. Then he felt around again, he found another pair of berries and he put them on and he looked, everything was black. He couldn't see anything. They were black berries, so he pulled those out and threw them away. Then he felt around again and he found, ooh, these are nice and soft and plump and stuff. And he put them on and he looked and everything was just perfect. The sky was blue, the water was blue, everything was just right. So that's how that particular crane came to have blue eyes.
That's a great story. But and when you do it in front of an audience, I've heard the eyes cry out.
Oh, yeah.
That's a fun part of it.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I want to show our audience is a mask that you made years ago entitled The Happy Hooker. Can you tell us the story behind that mask?
Well, this was the very first mask I ever carved, and the only thing I can think of was hooking, because I love to go hooking for, jigging off the seawall for whitefish or lush burbot, pipefish. And so that's the appendages are hooks, and there's a fish on a hook, a little hook there. It's wooden bone and all it is. See, she's thinking about the fish going through her mind up in the head and down here eating the fish. But that was thinking of the hookers. We're hookers. We call ourselves hookers because we love to hook fish.
And so I guess they frequent the waterfront of Bethel?
Oh, yeah. We're leaning over the side of the sea wall and have our jig in the water and the hook and doing this, and we're hooking, trying to hook a fish. And the police, the law enforcement kind of supports us hookers, encourages us to be hookers, but they tell us, but make sure you wear your personal flotation device. You might fall in. We don't want to lose you hookers.
So I get it that Yupik storytellers don't always tell stories from memory that they've inherited.
No, sometimes to make young people today who don't speak too much Yupik or don't know too many of the words, we have to improvise different endings to stories, so they could, understand it.
Well, we're just about out of time, but John, could you tell us about your legacy from Maggie Lind? What is that to you?
Well, having heard her singing and telling that little story about the goose, makes me very, very proud to be able to tell stories and pass on her stories to children in schools. In speaking engagements, I'll tell stories. And when I did the news, I began with Yupik stories, but they're in Yupik. And the news director didn't know that I was telling stories until somebody told me, oh, we just love John. He's telling stories.
Well, John, we are out of time, but on the web we will continue our conversation and talk a little bit about your time as a newscaster. There's some great stories to hear. Well, words once thought lost are returning to other native languages. And for one Juneau man, it was his grandparents who made all the difference in not just passing on the Tlingit language, but the Tlingit way of thinking.
And how you're representing your families here.
Most of us take language for granted. It's like the air we breathe. But imagine if your language was on the verge of extinction, words that allow us to share our deepest thoughts and feelings lost forever, dying with our elders. Well, that's how David Katzeek feels about Tlingit. He says language is about self-expression, and it's what holds a community together.
Hey, 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 ha, hey, ha, hey, ha, hey. The name is Ankh, the place of the small lake. But that word That sound at the end of the word ak indicates an intimacy.
An intimacy with the land David Katzeek experiences when he speaks Tlingit.
Tlingit ya kaduchike. You are a human being, and being human means you are very intelligent.
Words David said he heard when he lived with his grandparents in Klawock. David was groomed by grandparents on both sides to be a clan leader, reminded often that human intelligence is a gift to be used for the good of the community. Today in Juneau, you can find a few traces of the rich culture that thrived for thousands of years. But there are bridges to that world time almost forgot, bridges being built every day by elders determined their language will not die with them. What you're hearing is rare, a conversation in Tlingit carried on by two fluent speakers. There are fewer than 120 people on the entire planet who can do this.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I'll do the same.
Selena Everson and David Katzeek are among a group of elders working to pass Tlingit on to the next generation. Selena says working with David helps her remember.
The stories I knew I forgot completely. I think when we were forbidden to speak our language, I wiped that out of my mind.
When Selena was 14, she was sent to the Sheldon Jackson School in Sitka, where she knew her older brothers had been punished for talking in Tlingit, so she stopped speaking her language completely.
You know, I get stuck on words because I didn't speak it. I didn't even teach my own children, and I feel bad about it.
She'll say a word that will bring out of me other words that I have heard. And sometimes it's just like a joy because it's like all of a sudden, like a fish jumping out of the water.
Language and culture, medicine dispensed generously here at Harborview Elementary, healing old hurts, and fortifying the young with words from David's childhood.
Most precious, noble child of the earth. This is the way the ancient ones spoke. Say, Goodness cheese. Ho ho.
Yes, it's true, says David in Tlingit. Thank you from our innermost being.
Say thank you in our language. Goodness cheese.
David is grateful his language is once again heard in Tlingit country, the sounds of young, proud voices. Only a generation ago, teachers tried to shame children into silence.
Whoever was speaking the Tlingit language, they would have to stand like this and hold the rock.
David was 8 when a teacher made him hold rocks, but he used his imagination to cope.
I said, I wonder what the rocks would tell the history about this people. How would the rocks tell us what happened in this area? They would tell great stories. I made a game out of it, as opposed to feeling like I was being punished. I never looked at it as being punished. I knew why they were doing it, but I was taught what you do and what other people do doesn't have anything to do with who I am. It has everything to do with who you are.
David says the tide has turned on Tlingit, and while the waves may die, the water remains, like language.
We're coming through a famine right now. there's a hunger such as we have never experienced in all the years of our lives. It's not a hunger for food,
but a hunger for language and culture.
Yandakin. Yes. Yes. Oh, you're a storyteller and a half already. The fact that you said Raven was flying really high.
As David tells a story about how Raven stole a fish right out of another bird's mouth, the children follow closely.
You can be hungry like Raven to get all kinds of knowledge.
David enjoys feeding these hungry birds here at Harborview, so much so he volunteers every Monday.
Can you hear it? Our language is calling out to us, saying, Ya Duchat, Ya Duchat, here I am, here I am. And we're answering the call. And in answering the call, we're not hoarding it to ourselves, we're giving it away. And that's the only way anything comes back.
Southeast Alaska, with the opening of the Sea Alaska Heritage Institute in Juneau, is undergoing a renaissance of Alaska Native culture, and David Katzeek and other elders are a big part of that. Well, did John Active's story about how the crane got its blue eyes get you hungry for berries? Up next, viewers share photos of some of the wealth of the land, a final taste of summer. Later this month, a big court decision for Cook Inlet set netters. The Alaska Supreme Court will rule on whether a measure that would ban set netting on the Kenai and other urban areas can go to the voters. If the answer is yes, that could mean the end of the salmon fishery that for some families began before statehood.
I love it. It's a part of my lifestyle because I'm a fourth generation.
Opponents of set netting say it threatens Kenai kings, which are the mainstay of the sports fishing and Kenai Peninsula tourism industry. Join us next week as we take a look at this decades-old fish fight that seems to have no end in sight. Well, fish are not the only wild food that Alaskans are passionate about this time of the year. Many of us head to the open country in search of berries, and we have several photos to share over the next couple of weeks. This one comes to us from Janice Jackson and Haynes. Janice picked elderberries by the Chilkoot River. And this came to us from Nikki Corbett. She was berry picking with her niece in Nunapichuk near the Kuskokwim River. Great looking photo and beautiful berries. And you never know what you will run into when you're out berry picking. Meet the boss of the clan. Jimmy Lincoln snapped a shot of this musk ox herd while he and his family were out berry picking just outside of Tuksuk Bay. Well, from all of us at KTVA, we always hope that you will be able to find your own frontier. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.